Do you want to tell me when you first started doing lathe cuts?
It was in 2012. It was after the earthquake, a year or so after I sort of made an application for some support funding to go overseas and learn how to cut records in Germany. So I was sort of been interested in it for a long time and never really found anywhere where you could get, you know, a machine like this.
How'd you find it?
Just sniffing around on the internet, really, to be honest. Probably the primary place is a weblog called Lathe Trolls, and it's just people who are interested in cutting and mastering and pressing and everything to do with the manufacturing of records. The two strongest threads that come up on that were about two guys. One was about a guy called Syme, which is the guy I ended up buying this equipment off, and the other was about a guy called Flo, who I ended up buying one of his cutting heads as well. Lots of other stories by interesting people, but the two people who are actually manufacturing stuff that you could buy, I suppose you'd call it like desktop, as in it was kind of accessible financially and mechanically. Those are the two people that I was kind of following for a while.
Why do you like lathe cuts?
I suppose it comes from an obsession with records when I was a teenager. In New Zealand, getting dub plates over here was quite difficult. Most of the artists that came over and performed them had them as specials, the material that they were DJing. The idea of just having a pre-mastered one-off piece of music and then DJing it at a performance, you know, on a loud sound rig or something was you know, kind of a bit of a pinnacle. Didn't get very many at the time, but it was, you know, always been interested in the idea that New Zealand doesn't really have much access to that type of technology. We had a press in New Zealand that you know, went by the way a long time ago, and you know, the cutting setups or cutting mastering studios in New Zealand, there were very few, if any, that were operating in any kind of substantial way. So the idea of being able to achieve something that was competitive or comparable to the early cutters was something I was quite excited about.
What's the hardest part of it, do you think?
There's so many little variables. Let's just talk about calibration. You've got to calibrate the whole setup so that when the signal goes in, that what's coming out, you have essentially a register between what's going in and coming out, and you can create a measurement of some kind that allows you to adjust your input so that you can get the ideal sounding output. And so that whole circle feedback loop, I guess it were, of calibrating takes a long time. I mean, once you get up and you get rolling and you're just doing that function of turning it on and getting the machine rolling and putting the needle on the record and you know, you get a cut happening and essentially it does what it needs to do. That part, if you were just to watch it, you'd be like, oh, that seems pretty easy. But you know, 2 weeks before this week, I've spent the entire 2 weeks just doing one tiny wee task and trying to get that right. You just work through a range of tasks to get the whole thing up and calibrated properly, so that you can feel confident that what you're actually cutting sounds half decent. Yeah.
And so what are you doing mainly at the moment with the cuts and what's happening?
Well, at the moment we've got RDView 7-inch collection. We've been collecting a double A side, essentially, two musicians, so two each month. We generally kind of choose both an artist we think has done really well on the playlist as a New Zealand artist, whether they be from Christchurch or around New Zealand, and then you know, kind of look for a bit of synergy between the 7-inch itself, so A and B side, I guess you'd call it. Happy to say the quality of music that we've been getting this year has been outstanding. It's amazing range of material, you know, from te reo heavy metal through to stuff like Flo Wilson's sort of real experimental, to some really interesting pop from Glass Vaults. You know, it's been a great range of material coming in, and again, it just continues to show what quality, what creativity is going on in the music out there in the musical community, and it's great to be able to get that captured in a way that will remain on collection. Whereas, you know, who knows what happens with digital collections in the future. Whereas, you know, the good thing about the 7-inch is that they go in their hard copy and they can be listened to in another 80 years from now, just as they were recorded. Ooh.